All right, just waiting for the live stream on YouTube and we'll get started. Welcome back to the Authenticity Calling podcast. I'm your host, Ralitza Spassova, and today we have a special guest, Deb Hansen, who is the author of the book Borderlands, Stories from an El Paso Shelter. Deb, it's so amazing to have you here. Thank you for joining us, and so excited to hear about the story, the impact, the essence, and something you shared earlier before we started chatting, really what's going on in the collective and how this story actually impacts so many people, not just those in the border. So thank you for being here with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah, so I a few months ago finished my 5th winter volunteering in a shelter for people seeking safety and protection at the US-Mexico border. So it's always changing, it's always a new experience, and some of the situations can be actually a little comical, but it's been medicine for me. Many people I run into say, oh, this is so wonderful. You do this work. And I say, I need this work, that this gives me a whole new portal into an experience of life that has not been mine or my community's. So in that way, it gives me a greater sense of what I would call solidarity with a larger human project that seems to be going on right now. That we're taking all these fragments of a world and getting to know one another anew is one approach. And the other approach is to say, I'm going to put up a wall because I don't recognize you as my sister or as my brother. So it's an interesting time to be alive. It's an interesting time to do this work at the border.
It is an interesting time. What a calling. What a calling that is. I'm so curious how you ended up and kind of what was going on in your life when this opportunity came up, and how did you know that you had to be there?
Wonderful question. Thank you. Yeah, my life has been like a labyrinth. I have a lot of, I would always call it bordering envy of people who have known at a young age that I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be a mother, a parent, and have put down deep roots in a community. And my path has been a little idiosyncratic, I guess you'd say, in that I get a message in a bottle periodically. And
isn't that the mystic, divine, feminine wisdom and guidance, one step at a time? I feel like there are so many more of us who actually do this walk with God and Godspeed than we actually talk about, because I've heard this more often, and it's definitely a mirror and reflection for me personally. So I have to say you're not alone, and it can feel very isolated and alone while we're on our path. So I love that you shared in that perspective. Yeah, and I'm curious to hear more.
Well, it sometimes happens to me. I got a message in a bottle and it said, you need to go to the border. It didn't make any sense. These messages usually don't. And over a lifetime, I have learned that they feel a particular way. It's not something that comes from somewhere in me. It's something that comes from someplace else. It makes no sense. I don't understand it. But particularly, I think in the last 5 years or so, the whole trajectory is starting to make more sense. Just to give you an example, I thought I would be teaching French in higher ed. There was no work at the time. The computer field was growing by leaps and bounds. I'd never had a business class. I'd never had a computer class. They were looking for people with a teaching background, and I ended up working with IBM for 20 years, uh, and had some great experiences. And as synchronicity would have it, I got to work in Paris for a couple of years, and was our European headquarters. I could work in a comfortable culture that I knew and understood. I didn't have the vocabulary in French, but I could socialize all weekend in French very comfortably.
It always comes back full circle. That's so funny.
It always comes back full circle.
Yeah.
And then I got into coaching, life and leadership coaching, and my work with people kept drifting to deeper spiritual levels.
Mm-hmm.
I felt I wanted to get more grounded and find more community.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going through a chaplaincy program and was ordained as an interfaith minister and interfaith chaplain, and served for several years in a trauma hospital in inner city Detroit, and absolutely loved it. I wish I could have gotten into that field earlier.
Yeah.
So one thing leads to another. And then I got this call to go to the border. And I'm like, what? I speak French. Am mildly functional in Spanish,
Yeah.
but this was all new. Where did this come from? And a young friend of mine looked like he was going to be making his life at the border. I wasn't even sure where he lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I contacted him and said, can you suggest a few organizations I could look into?
Yeah.
And he just very nonchalantly said, you go to Annunciation House. End of story. So I looked at the website. It looked compelling.
Yeah.
The organization has been doing this work since 1978, so decades of experience
Yeah.
with changing conditions over time. And yeah, one thing has led to another. And in addition to just the humble, practical work of
Mm-hmm.
hospitality,
Mm-hmm.
getting people checked in,
Mm-hmm.
having a room that's clean, that's available for them,
Mm-hmm.
um, assigning them to a chore, like we're all assigned, the project doesn't work unless everybody's pitching in. Toothbrushes, diapers, whatever is needed, call their sponsor, tell them where they are, that they're safe, find out, whether they want to travel by bus, whether they want to travel by air, those kinds of particulars. But there is, I'd call it a grace that settles on to these houses. We're a network of shelters, and each one has a particular specialty or two. But one of the things I've noticed is that you can't do this work alone.
Mm.
I've known people who, out of the goodness of their hearts, I really would like to sponsor an individual, sponsor a couple. Ooh, there are so many considerations. There are legal considerations, there are housing considerations, there's school considerations, there's mental health considerations, because many of the people are traumatized based on what they've gone through and why they've left. So I love working in what I would call a community of care.
Mm. Yeah. It's so necessary. I think just for every individual that's born in a first world country, let alone going through what these people are going through. And so I'm just I have so many questions. And maybe we should actually start with an excerpt, something from the book. I know you wanted to share a little bit about, kind of a day
Thank
in the
you.
life of. Um,
Yeah.
there was
Well,
a
the
question I had
the
before we dive into that, though. It was, you said message in a
sure.
bottle. I think for
Hmm.
the listeners, what does that look like for you? Because it's obviously not a literal message in the bottle. That could have been. I mean, maybe. But I think a lot of us that are intuitively guided and led into these kind of spiritual spaces, I call them synchronicities. I know you mentioned the term as well, but kind of those, what we may call happy coincidences, things start to show themselves and they're aligned. You look something up and there's an angel number 222 or 444, look at the time and the clock. And those are kind of my synchronicities that remind me often that I'm on the right track. But what does your message in a bottle tangibly, physically, practically look like and feel like or sound like? For those people who are just starting to wake up to their intuition and their inner guidance, because a lot of what I do with people is actually getting people. And I think now more than ever is such an important time to be in tune with our intuition and to be really deeply connected to ourselves and that Christ consciousness or that connection with God, if you call it that, or some people call it, like my dad, who was born and raised in communist Bulgaria, calls it, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it, the connection with the divine within that is that higher order calling or purpose. Just really curious if you can speak a little bit to that for anyone who's listening. That's kind of like, what does she mean by
Oh, yeah, it's such a good question, and it's challenging to put into words.
Yeah.
It would be, on one hand, it would be an idea.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, it would be something that starts to take hold of me physically.
Mm.
Maybe around the abdomen,
Okay.
and doesn't go away. It's very persistent.
Mm-hmm.
I know that earlier in life, I would make arguments, I would make up stories
Against it or for it?
against
Yeah.
it. This doesn't make sense. It
Yeah.
has to make sense. It has to fit in with how I construct my world right now.
Yes.
And, it was like with going into this chaplaincy program. I'm like, what? And I looked at the website. Somebody had recommended this small, relatively new school. And I just was blown away. I'm like, this would be the program I would have designed for myself. There was a lot of emphasis on the arts, the interfaith aspect, all the wisdom traditions of the world. It kind of on a plate, on a table, a buffet table in front of us. But I sat on that for a year and it just would not go away. Um, I finally got to the point where it's like I wasn't making much money at the time. I didn't know how I was going to pay for what at the time was 13 trips to California. I do climate work now. Like, oh, yikes. Um, and once I said yes to that, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. If I had taken a poll of people who knew me for most of my life and said, what is the one thing you never would think of me doing? That would probably be it. And literally, I don't know whether it was the next day or possibly 2 days, but I got a call. I was doing some career coaching at the time. And I got a call from the Detroit office, and they said, we've got the biggest project that we've ever had. It was for one of the auto companies, and where we would come down for, I think it was 2.5 months and work like 10 to 12-hour days, 4 days a week, and then have a 6-hour day on Friday. Fascinating project, but I immediately had the wherewithal to start this program. So things that you just can't explain, that once you surrender, once you recognize that this is not your ego speaking, that this is coming from another place, this call that just, it's got you. It doesn't go away.
Absolutely. And your ego fights it. Your ego and your logic and your reason and everything inside is like, no, this
Exactly.
can't make it make sense. I just want to really normalize that when it's a spiritual calling, when it's something within, when it is the divine, it is asking us to fall so much into that unknown, so much into that space of trust and surrender. And we talk about it. I talk about it in the work that I do and on the podcast as the divine feminine, but that being energy, that trusting, that full, you can't plan it, organize it, or orchestrate it in a better way than the divine already has for us. And so normalizing that space of just trusting. And you're right, it doesn't go away. It keeps knocking at every door. There's signs outside that you see, and you're like, wait, what? It's fascinating how life just shows us once we start to open up to that.
Yes.
So thank you for going a little bit deeper and explaining that, because I think that, again, in the collective, this is happening to a lot of people, and it can be, I think, very scary for some people that are used to either being micromanaged or being in environments that are very bland and orchestrated and kind of stable. The unknown is not meant to be a scary place. We're meant to actually release into it. And I'm just so excited to be having these conversations with people who have recognized that, okay, it is a constant growth edge for all of us. I have to say, it is a daily surrender. It is triggers and trauma all day long. But when you come from a place of recognizing that this is a growth edge, it becomes, rather than scary, exciting. And that heart racing isn't from a place of, oh my gosh, doom and gloom, I'm going to die, but from a place of, oh, this might be actually so juicy and exciting and expansive. And so I just want to invite anybody that's out there who's kind of started having these callings and these awarenesses of like, I'm being asked to do something that doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. It's not practical, whether it's leaving the 9 to 5 or leaving the partner or, going on some wild trip and vacation or whatever it is. Not to say that you need to uproot your entire life, but if you're facing this calling, this invitation, this knocking, this message in a bottle to do something different, it might be the best thing you ever do in your life. So I just really wanted to, dig into that a little bit, and really felt a calling to normalize that. So thank you for sharing.
Beautiful. And just to riff off some of what you said, someone I had worked with earlier had an expression that fear and excitement feel the same in the belly.
Yeah.
And how it just shifts back and forth between those two different feelings.
Yeah. And we can do it scared, right? Like a lot of people and coaches and mentors and guides in this space, they say, do it scared. I think that's a title of a book or something that I've heard of somewhere, but it's doing the thing anyways, right? And taking that step forward and like, what's the worst that could happen? Well, what's the best that could happen too, right? Yeah, beautiful, beautiful point. Anxiety and fear versus excitement. Exactly. The story that we tell ourselves is the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both are real, at least for me. They dwell together.
Yeah. Yes. And is it okay to take that step knowing that there may be something to fear, yet there's also the other side? And actually, it's funny because that's how energy works. It's where are we committing that energy is what will be created from it. And I think that is a fascinating conversation to have if you're open to diving into
That
that
is
a
a
little bit.
fascinating conversation to have. Yes. Yeah, it's just that I've experienced it in relationship, particularly across boundaries, across difference, where proceeding with care and respectfully recognizing the various historical traumas that our various lineages have survived, have lived through, can just open up new vistas of possibility. And it sounds trite to use the expression of light.
Yeah.
But my most recent experience of that has been a state of surrender, I think, for both of us, in that there is a light that comes, a light of grace, that just opens up new healing possibilities. In this particular case, where it involved 3 individuals in an organization, each from a different path, me being European American, the person who I was with, Jewish from Israel, but now living in the United States, and a third person in a war zone. So humbling, humbling work that really, I very much appreciate Bayo Akomolafe's work and this notion of when you're companioning someone in whatever capacity, this notion that you could both step into the unknown together. You have a particular responsibility as, let's say, the guide, the mentor, the companion. But you also are entering uncharted space, uncharted waters. And taken in that spirit, so much can open up rather than I have my tools, I have my skills, which we all do, and that's important. And I think the times that we're living in right now, where the structures, at least in my experience, are all, they're dry. They don't bring life anymore. Actually, what they're doing is they're bringing death and destruction.
And separation, 100%.
And separation, yes. Othering, all kinds of things. And where's the midwife for this birthing process, this collective birthing process that we're going through? Where is the midwife? And, we have to be the midwife.
We are it.
Maybe to each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And from a place of that, again, trust and unconditional, I don't even want to call it love, because it's so much, as you said, surrender is the word of that unknown, but and trust maybe isn't even the right term for it, but just that open-hearted connection, because I think what I'm recognizing more and more is the place that my judgments come from, the place that wants to keep me safe, that ego that wants to restore, whether it's justice or whether it's safety or whether it's humility or whatever it is that is calling, the attention and the mind to focus on. Surrender is actually removing all of those identities, all of the veils and all of the differences, and actually feeling into our spirit soul and that level of unconditionality of that wisdom and guidance, and just having a free-flowing conversation even. And that's what the Authenticity Calling podcast is all about. It's like, let's see what comes through us in this space, because it could be anything. We could be talking about anything and everything. And so, yeah, I feel like if we were to approach every moment in life with this level of openness and surrender, we could have such juicier life experiences and, connection. And we lean so much on language and conversation, I think, but a lot happens in the silence, and so much unfolds in spaces where you can't understand each other and you are literally speaking different languages. And I think that's fascinating that you get to experience that on a daily basis.
Thank you. Oh, I could go in so many directions with this. Even just language, I live in a culture that resists vulnerability and tenderness. So that already is deeply countercultural. And another case for, from where I sit, the community, the beloved community that will hold me, that will hold you, that will hold us together.
Yeah.
As we make mistakes, as something happens we hadn't anticipated and it's not working out well. Things don't necessarily always work out well,
Yeah.
even when we do surrender and we trust. So a word that's really juicy, I would say, for me right now is solidarity.
Mm-hmm.
And it relates to trust. I find it at the border, and I also had a rich experience last fall as part of a multi-faith delegation to Palestine. Israel is the language that I hope is respectful for everyone. But this common cause of, I'm not the helper. We are in this together as peers, sorting this through. You have, I'm going to say this to many of our people. I mean, our people come from all over the world. It really is remarkable. We've had someone from Russia, we had someone from the Ukraine, someone from China. How does this happen? We don't always get to know the details, but most of our people are from Latin America. And I get very wistful when I see what a healthy culture can do for an individual in helping them be more resilient. I don't want to romanticize this because there's a lot of violence all over the world right now that is just deeply vexing my spirit. I love that old-fashioned language. But it was the same in the West Bank, in Israel. Few people get into Gaza these days, East Jerusalem. And the situation right now is so precarious with the fever that the earth seems to be experiencing right now that is showing up with a lot of fire energy and violence. So we know that Israel bombed Tehran in Iran. We know that Iran retaliated. There is a group that we actually got to meet on a kibbutz. We got to meet the current executive director of a group called Rabbis for Human Rights. And I just wanted to share a short, but for me, very beautiful story that they posted on Facebook. I think it was yesterday, that one of the missiles or several of the missiles that were fired from Tehran hit a Palestinian village in the north of Israel. And 4 fairly young women from the same family were killed in that attack. And the beautiful work of Rabbis for Human Rights is they had a small group of people who went to the tent of mourning of the family with all the tensions, with all the historical trauma that gets kicked up with this. They made an effort to be there, to comfort that family, to be with them, and to say, there's one pain among us, and there's plenty of pain and grief to go around. Let us be together here in this tent of mourning, in peace and in solidarity. I am with you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so much about what's happening globally, yes. In our own backyards. There's so much that's going on with civil unrest and this, like, I mean, the carrot is just there for everyone to jump on. And I usually don't get involved in political conversations, but I think it's really important to remind us all to be grounded in our humanity, and that there's an agenda that we do not need to be part of. It's a choice. And I think that's all I'll say there. But I just, being in our humanity, in that vulnerability, I think is really important right now. I think that's part of the birthing, part of that process of our awakening. Remembering, some people call it healing, others call it remembering. There's a massive epigenetic shift that's happening right now. And I think that's where, kind of that conversation started of, what do we then focus on? What do we commit to? And is that commitment going to be fear and war and fighting and, for the purpose of whatever you want to call it, whether it's, patriotism or, sovereignty or whatever you want to say that you're fighting for at the end of the day. Are we choosing to fight? Are we choosing war? Are we choosing open hearts, or are we choosing closed minds? And so that's just what's coming through. And I'm really trusting that it lands in a good way, and is a really deep invitation for lack of better word, unconditional love for ourselves and for our neighbors, whoever they might be. Because I think, to me, that is humanity. That is humility. That is the way that we will move forward. Because if we continue this, we're going to end up all looking at our identities, 20 different people across a room, which, if we were to believe the politicians, we should all hate each other. I've sat at tables with Turkish people. I come from communist Bulgaria. Everything in my body should hate those people. We were ruled by the Ottoman Empire. They came in and stole our babies and trained them against their own families and sent them in to kill their own kind. Everything in me should be rejecting connecting on any level with somebody who is Turkish, but that doesn't happen in my body. And those people across the table have so much humility and compassion for what has happened in history. And they too come to the table with open hearts. And although there's no blatant, apology or that conversation, the vulnerability is there. And it's so raw to feel love over everything else that could be there. And acceptance and that human compassion and humility, that grace that you talked about. Yeah. Thank you for holding space for that.
Oh, thank you. That is just, for me, that is the work. We were intended to be 28 people on this delegation, not including the staff of the organization that was hosting us. One person didn't get across the border, but we were organized on this side of the ocean. We weren't all from the US and Canada, but the majority of us were rabbis for ceasefire. That was really important for me because there are no sides in the circle of life.
Exactly.
We had a couple of Palestinian American Muslim women. We had a Burmese genocide scholar in exile who lives in the UK now. We had Catholic workers, we had Methodists, we had Baptists, we had Quakers, we had the founder of Hindus for Human Rights.
Wow.
And I've been involved with a number of community-based interfaith groups. And they're great because we don't know each other. We're afraid to make a mistake. We want to be respectful. Sometimes we're a little nervous and afraid. So often the conversations tend to avoid the really challenging work because maybe we're not ready for that. But I was so proud of our group. Our schedule changed daily because the violence was escalating with so many divergent perspectives and life experiences and hurts and histories. Um, we didn't have time for reflection together as we had hoped to have. We spent a lot of time on the bus. But if somebody had a concern, an issue, they would go up to the microphone at the front of the bus and share what was on their heart. We'd talk it we'd talk it through together as best we could. We would make a decision on what the group could agree that we wanted to do. And there was, I think, always a consensus. But as you said, it was so deep and so tender. And I was just so proud of us. Nothing is ever perfect, but this is the courage that it takes to know that we're going to make mistakes. We are going to get hurt. We are going to hurt others despite our best intentions. But this is how we heal. This is how we quilt these trauma fragmented pieces of cloth of life back together again into something beautiful and colorful. And I loved your word juicy. Yeah. That it's easy to hold on to what we know, to what's familiar, even if it doesn't bring life, even if it doesn't bring vitality. And you reach a point where that divine mother, called by many names, is going to have her way with us sooner or later.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And something important comes through in that. And I think it's very important when we talk about connecting with, again, in our identities, connecting with people who are maybe on the opposite side of this, whatever, whether it's political, whether it's whatever, to be able to actually make decisions together in consensus. It's not this colonial voting system. It is making sure that everyone agrees that this is how we're moving forward. I think that's a really big part of our birthing process, is this new way of being, of doing things, of showing up together, this collective co-creation. We are all being invited. Not we must, not we have to. No, it's not even a choice like that. It is simply the only way that order can be established is through consensus. And what does that mean? Do I necessarily fully agree with every step of the of what you're proposing? Maybe not, but I'm not going to get in the way of it moving forward. That's called a stand aside in governance. So we do this now in the healthcare system in BC. We're moving from voting into consensus decision making, from having a chair to having a convener. And it's so important because it brings the quiet voices. It really allows space and time for those, there's the fast-paced people who are relational, who are usually in that space of leadership, but now it allows that slowing down for those moderately paced people who need some more time to think before they speak, who really want to get the evidence and need to dig into things a little more, and before they even can form an opinion, right? And if we're talking about consensus decision making, we really need to be able to show up for all types of people, all types of learners, all types of communicators, and really just to be mindful that just because we function one specific way, it was a disc profile that we did yesterday as a team. I'm an I, probably not surprisingly to most people. I'm fast-paced and I'm people-oriented and I'm all about connection and relationships. And it's go, go, go. But we can seem very chaotic to a lot of people, especially the challengers who really like to take their time, who like to do their research, who like to dig in, who are more individualistic and, maybe look like introverts. And all of them matter, right? Every perspective matters when you talk about consensus decision making. You know, as a family, there's no authoritarian. It's like, yes, there can be a leader, and that leader would be best fit to actually bring everyone in consensus for harmony to happen. And it's not about balance. We think, you know, I think those old terminology would be balance. The new terminology is harmony. And so, you know, equity versus equality, right? Like it's not about being equal, but let's talk about equity. Maybe that means we give the quiet person the mic 80% of the time, because guess what? We haven't heard from them 80% of the times before. And so it's just that shift from that sort of, you know, leadership driven decision making for the loudest voice in the room versus really being able to slow down and hold space and be quiet and to witness what's not being said and to allow that to actually land in our bones. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just another aspect of all of the wonderful things that you just said. Um, Part of my border crossing has been with groups that have been historically in the country I live in undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I worked in a hospital in Detroit, 97, probably even more percent African American.
Mm-hmm.
It's such intimate moments in people's lives around death and dying, illness, tough choices. I wasn't sure how that would be for me, and I wasn't sure how I would be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much. But the dominant culture is called the dominant culture for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
that I had to be coached, mentored, taught about the tendency of just doing what for me was normal, to be able to share my voice when I felt like it,
Mm-hmm.
because that culturally was permitted. I, in Northern Michigan, now have friendships with indigenous people. Um, I made some missteps early on that caused pain on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
not realizing what I was doing, and how deep the woundedness was from the history on this land. Being at the border, I work with people from Latin America, but from Africa, from Haiti, from many different places. And they have been my teachers. Now to be drawn into what is euphemistically called a conflict zone. In all of this, I have a friend in Detroit who introduced me to the term Disneyfication, like Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
That is a person of privilege from the dominant culture. I can travel the world in a safe set of curated experiences, protected from the more raw experiences of people who might be just a few streets or blocks away from me. So that is what I call my medicine,
Mm-hmm.
of just in a sense, we're all wounded in some way
Mm.
and vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
and tender.
Mm-hmm.
So to take that mindfully and carefully to start to rebuild trust and respect in the solidarity of saying, you may have hurt me, but I'm staying in the room.
Mm.
I'm not going away.
Mm.
I am here to listen to you share what you feel that I need to hear. And, that requires a level of spiritual and emotional maturity
Mm.
because it's really easy at times when the air begins to crackle or intensify to spin out into
Mm-hmm.
old patterns and old hurts. And it is so wildly exciting
Mm.
to repair those connections. And I just feel the ancestors at times eavesdropping on our conversations
Mm.
and smiling
Mm.
and chuckling,
Mm.
saying, yes.
Mm.
This is
Beautiful.
good.
Yeah.
This is good.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we come across that a lot in the work that we do as well. Uh, attempting to be an ally is the right terminology. I learned you can't call yourself an ally ever, right? Only the person that you are supporting and being an ally for actually identify you as an ally. So it's really important to come with that humility and that recognition of the protection that comes from the whiteness or whatever whatever label we put on that. You know, we call it dominant or majority, but I feel that the numbers have been misconstrued to show a majority. The real majority is actually not what we call the majority. The real minority is not what we call the minority. And there is so much power in numbers. I think people are waking up to that. And so there's a massive shift that's also happening in that and our ability to, there's this almost consent reality, this consensus that there is protection and safety, and that's why it exists. But what happens when it all crumbles? At the end of the day, our soul, our spirit is what will guide us and lead us and protect us in our truth and our transparency and our vulnerability. And that is what matters. To come surrendered from our flesh to do the good thing that is the truth, right? To hold that space of unconditional acceptance and love, that vulnerability that, I didn't choose this skin that I'm in. And, as you said earlier and before, our ancestors are not necessarily part of a choice that we ever had. We came into this space and now what? What are we going to do with that? It's so important. And especially today is June 19th. It's Juneteenth. And
it's
such an
Juneteenth.
important day to, celebrate and honor that for those that do care, it's not easy. And yeah, I guess this is a call to contemplation of how do we choose to show up in that space that's, maybe not easy for many, many people. Yeah. So
You're taking me back to one experience in particular in Detroit. There was a national gathering on energy issues that was very, very diverse. It was people coming, doing organizing work at the community level. We would sit in circle. It was quite a large group. We would sit in circle in the morning, and whoever wanted to share would share. And it must have been about halfway through. people started sharing freely. And there was a group of young people, and they said, "You are leaving us a royal mess. And you're not even listening to us. If this doesn't change by the end of the day, we're leaving because we don't feel respected." The indigenous women had something else that they wanted to share. They said, "We have thousands of years of lived experience caring for this land and being cared for by this land. We do not feel like we have been given our knowledge, our experience has just not been honored here at all." So at noon, we know it's not on the agenda, but we wanted to let you know we're going to the river to pray. Everyone's invited. We know it's not on the agenda, but this is what is happening. And I think all or almost all of us showed up on the river to pray with them. And it was so intense and so important to have those conversations. I know there was one day, by the end of the day, I thought the top of my head was going to come off. The intensity was so great. I skipped the evening program. But every day when I left that space, I just felt, talk about authenticity calling.
Yeah.
That was authenticity calling. And we all had to listen to some things that were hard for us to hear. But there were echoes of hurt reverberating throughout space and time. That this is the healing that wants to happen.
Yeah.
That life cares for life.
Mm-hmm.
And living in these little nation states that are made up by powerful, usually European men, that there is a deeper allegiance that I feel I owe to the land, to the water, and that there is a sense of urgency, of imperative to reground ourselves back to the land that we depend on every day for life itself. And to kneel down in the ashes of what is dying and trusting that new life will come.
Thank you. Yeah, what comes through right away is, I think so often we move to solutions, especially in our sort of first world thinking. The power of vulnerability and authenticity without vulnerability is nothing. And, it's been a deep work for the last 5-6 years since I started, since I left medicine and came into the spiritual space of opening up that, I used to call myself an emotional ninja, that avoidance of all the things that are scary and vulnerable and emotional and moving. And that is actually the greatest gift that we can offer anyone when we attempt to be an ally is to actually hold that pain together so that, those who are suffering don't have to suffer alone. And, I think that's also part of the calling right now to create Up to Health. Up to Health is a movement, it's a cultural revolution in healthcare for physicians and providers and healthcare workers and people who are actually in the space. It's not, the healing doesn't come from the medications. That's, numbing the symptoms for the most part. Not to say that some medications are wonderful. We need to put out the fire, sometimes, but the core inner work that happens in the spiritual space in between people, whether it's physician and patient, whether it's, neighbors, friends and foe, whatever that is that in between space of holding the weight together and being able to process that energy together. And part of what came through, I was in London for the conversation from Richard Rudd, actually, in the Gene Keys, talking about the future human. And something that came through, it was so strong and powerful to feel, but just Mother Nature is asking us all to feel a little more, like stop grounding into her and releasing all of those emotions that we're not willing to hold on our own into the earth, but now come up and pick it up and take some of that and feel for her a little bit. That came through so strong. And it's something that I don't know that many of us actually recognize, how much we dispel. Again, when we touch grass or we touch trees, how much we take from the tree rather than giving from our open heart, how much and how actually nurturing that is, coming from that space of service and appreciation and gratitude, but just to give, to allow that life force energy through us, to offer ourselves to the space, to offer to be a vessel, to hold whatever comes through, to be in the unknown and to be completely, surrendered and unguarded and weaponless is so raw and real and might be the best thing we can offer.
I'll take that over a bomb.
Absolutely.
Any day.
I think we all would and should. Wow.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to hold some space in here, if you feel called to share part of the book. I think it would be amazing for the audience to really receive your words in your words, in your voice. Yeah.
Just looking for the book is, the stories are told from three angles. One are the stories of the people who came into the shelter and shared life with us. The second is, I was never a good student of history. I didn't relate to the way history was told, with dates and powerful men and wars and territory and all this. So I share what I learned along the way. And now that history is being told through different voices from different perspectives, I just am finding that context, to have any basic understanding of where we are and how we got here, that historical context is just essential. So what I was drawn to was just to share a few parts of this history. The third part of the book is my own reflections, which are intended not to say, I have the answers for you, but to say, this is what I've been chewing on. Maybe you'd like to chew on some of these things as well. So the first story is, wanted to share a couple stories of the border. And I don't know how things are across the northern border in Canada these days, but many times here right now, there's a sense of shock at some of the things that are happening. They are shocking, and they're not new when put in a historical context. That I live on stolen land. This is a nation that was founded in extreme violence, in ethnic cleansing, in trafficking people for their skills and their labor. That's painful stuff to confront. And the good news is when we face it, own it, and start to make some amends, spirit frees up in all of us. And it's exciting, rewarding, and painful work here. So just a couple stories on this. David, who's a microhistorian in El Paso, David Romo, I heard a lecture from him one day. David reminds us that people were able to travel back and forth across the river with two names freely and without a passport until 1917. One of the things that strikes a chord is learning more about Carmelita Torres, who is compared to Rosa Parks. The year is 1917. Imagine you are 17 years old, a maid living in Juarez and cleaning homes in El Paso. You ride the trolley across the bridge to get to work. Before you are allowed to enter the US, you must go into a building where you are required to strip and take a bath in gasoline. Your clothing is treated in a steam dryer. Both of these procedures are said to be intended to kill any lice, carriers of typhus, on your body. And there were outbreaks in several cities in Mexico. You never learn that you've been secretly photographed in the nude. Your photo and others are now on display in a bar. What do you do? Carmelita Torres decided she'd had enough. She convinced about 30 women in her car to refuse the process. Once they began their demonstration, they were eventually joined by thousands, blocking entry into El Paso. The police were unable to break up the protest. Carmelita Torres was never seen again after her arrest. This moment in history became known as the bath riots. These practices continued for decades, long after the typhus scare was over. Ongoing disrespect and humiliation take on new forms over time. Thank you for holding that the way you are. Just one more if I could.
Yeah, thank you for sharing
I feel like Carmelita can feel that
that.
energy coming her way. She's not been forgotten. So this was during my first winter there. Again, people are rightly horrified that people are being snatched off the streets, in courtrooms, trying to do the things that they were asked to do. People in unmarked cars, people who are masked, who are not identifying themselves. But again, the historical perspective for me was very instructive. We volunteers watch a documentary called Harvest of Empire, the untold stories of Latinos in America. We watch it together in the evening in our little hangout room. U.S. involvement in places like Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and more is the focus of the film. It's sobering. I was not taught these things in school, but it doesn't end there. About 1 million people of Mexican ethnicity were loaded onto trains to Mexico during the Depression when work was scarce. Deportations. It's estimated that 60% of the 1 million people loaded on the trains were US citizens. But just to lighten the energy a little bit, I think this was last winter before last, just when I thought I had seen everything. Venezuela had been melting down for a while, but we were seeing at the border a remarkable flow of people, and we were only receiving the minority. The majority were staying somewhere in Latin America or the Caribbean.
They came across to Aruba. They came across the ocean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm thinking back on my people as well. Anyway, I wasn't living in the shelter after my third year. Working 6 days a week at this point in life was just a lot. But I had heard that we had had a family from Venezuela who had brought their dog. And of course, our house coordinator said, we can't accept pets in the house. And the dad said, no problem. I will sleep outside with the dog. So our AM shift starts at 6 a.m. So I walk over just as it's starting to get a little light in the sky. I get the key. I do the security check of the building outside. And as I'm walking around to the narrow part of the building, I see somebody sleeping under a blanket. And I look closer, and there is a paw sticking out of the blanket. And later, I got to meet Coqueta, who was a pit bull puppy. Absolutely beautiful. And it's like, I could not leave this family member behind. How she got here, how she got across the border, I have absolutely no idea. But there are just moments like that are surprising that put a smile on my face.
The humanity.
The
Humanity, we call it
humanity,
humility.
yes.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Man's best friend. Yeah, it's fascinating what some people will do for, again, we dismiss them as just animals, but we don't do for each other. And so thank you for sharing, these stories and these voices. It's so important from this place of power, from this place of capacity, to really take the calling and to answer it in such a meaningful way. And thank you for sharing your voice here and these stories of people who may not otherwise be able to share their voice and their impact and their spirit and their work in the world, and amplifying those voices is so important. So thank you. Thank you for answering the calling. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing, into the world with the book, with your voice, with your impact and your mission and your calling, and coming in, the skin that you came in to do the good work. And have these vulnerable conversations. It's so important, and to hold the space. So thank you.
Yeah, I feel well received, and No, thank you.
Mm, mm. Yeah, really uplifting your mission and your journey. Mm. If you were to leave us with a pearl, some wisdom from the elder in you, what would you impart on us today?
Oh, so much comes up.
Mm.
It's a Recently I heard, it might have been Tiokasin Ghost Horse, say that indigenous cultures have elders,
Mm.
wisdom keepers.
Mhm.
Modern culture has experts.
Mm.
And I don't mean at all to minimize expertise, but when it's ungrounded in tradition, in lived experience, at a particular time on a particular piece of land, expertise on its own is ungrounded.
Mm.
And for me, it's these healthy cultures, I think I mentioned earlier, that ground us and stabilize us on the land, but they also teach us that we have responsibilities to each other and to life, to live in balance, to live in harmony,
Mm.
so that the entire circle may be well.
Mm. Thank you. Mm. How does one take a step towards that
Mhm.
aligned action?
Hmm. I have been playing with a growing understanding of the word emergent
Mm.
or emergence. And I love dancing.
Mm.
When I was a hospital chaplain, again at the border, you never know what's going to happen
Mm.
during the day. It's very unpredictable. So it's this notion of a willing spirit, that I am willing to dance with whatever shows up
Mm.
in my day, and to meet it open-heartedly to the best of my capacity, not relying on old rules and protocols of the spirit of Nora Bateson, who talks about improv,
Mm.
getting off of the old script and being here now in the moment.
Mm.
What am I being led to say?
Mm.
What am I being led to do?
Mhm.
And to have that trust that we can make this up
Mhm.
as we go along.
Wow.
But I love the spirit of the dance,
Mm.
because for me, it's joyful, freeing,
Mhm.
and relational.
Mm. Thank you.
Mm.
I'm hearing that if you're in the room, your voice, your energy, your impact matters. And so if you're in any room, ask yourself, what am I being called to contribute here? And so beautiful that it doesn't necessarily have to be in voice, but dance, that's so beautiful. And that energy and that holding and our capacity is so much more than just our words and our actions. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Thank you, Deb. It has been such an honor to
Oh,
have you on the podcast.
what a blessing.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Beautiful.
Loved it.
Mm. Thank you.
Blessings on your work.
Thank you. Blessings on yours.
Life affirming. I received that. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. We'll chat again soon. And with no doubt, we'll see each other at some point. I feel that.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deb. Have a beautiful time.
Thank you. Thank you.